The sky turned blood red over Chicago as the Krazak ships broke through Earth's atmosphere. Lieutenant Alan Mitchell stood on the roof of the half-destroyed military outpost, watching as the alien vessels moved with terrible precision. The invasion had started 3 days ago. 3 days that changed everything. Alan checked his rifle again. The weapon felt too light, too small against what was coming. Around him, the remaining soldiers of his squad prepared for what they all knew might be their last stand. The radio crackled with desperate messages from other cities. New York had fallen yesterday. Los Angeles was silent. "Lieutenant, enemy forces approaching from the north," said Private Jeff Carter, lowering his binoculars. "They have ground troops this time. At least 100. Alan nodded. His face showed no fear, only a cold focus that had settled in since he got the news about his family. His wife Lisa and daughter Emma had been at home when the first bombs fell on the suburbs. There had been no survivors in that area. "Get everyone in position," Alan ordered. "We hold this point as long as we can. Reinforcements are supposed to be coming." No one mentioned that reinforcements hadn't come for any other outpost. They all just nodded and moved to their spots along the roof edge and in the windows of the upper floors. The radio operator, Diane Wilson, called out to Alan. "Sir, new orders from command. They want us to fall back to the safe zone. They say this position is lost." Alan looked at the faces of his team. 15 men and women, tired and scared, but still ready to fight. He had known most of them for years. Had shared meals with them, trained with them, trusted them. "Tell them we're staying," he said finally. "We can slow the enemy advance, give civilians more time to evacuate." No one argued. They had all seen too much in the past 3 days to believe running would save them. If they were going to die, it would be while doing something that mattered. The first wave of Krazak soldiers came into view 30 minutes later. They moved in perfect formation, their scaled bodies reflecting the reddish light of the sky. Each stood over 7 feet tall with 4 arms and armor that seemed to absorb the bullets fired at them. "Aim for the joints," Alan reminded his team as they opened fire. "Between the plates." For a while it seemed to work. The aliens fell back, regrouped, tried a different approach. Alan's squad held them off for nearly 2 hours. But then the second wave arrived, and with them came the one Alan would later learn was called Vexthor. Even from a distance, this alien looked different, bigger, more heavily armored, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large. The other Krazak visibly kept their distance from him. "Focus fire on the big one," Alan ordered, taking aim himself. The bullets hit their mark but seemed to do nothing. The large alien turned toward their position, raised what looked like a staff, and a blast of energy tore through the building's defenses. The world turned to noise and dust. Alan felt himself thrown backward by the blast. When he could see again, half the roof was gone. Private Carter lay dead beside him. Diane was calling for help from where she was pinned under fallen concrete. Alan pulled himself up, ignoring the pain in his side where shrapnel had cut through his armor. He helped free Diane, then checked on the others. 5 dead. The rest injured, some badly. "Fall back," he ordered. "Get to the stairwell. We're leaving." They carried those who couldn't. Walk, leaving the dead behind. As they reached the stairs, Alan looked back one last time. The large alien commander had reached the building and was scaling the outer wall, moving much faster than something that size should be able to move. On the street level, they found 2 military vehicles that still worked. They loaded the wounded and prepared to move out. Alan was the last to get in. "Lieutenant, come on," called Sergeant Kyle Baker from the driver's seat. Alan looked back at the building, then at the sky filled with alien ships. Something cold and final settled in his chest. "You go," he said. "Get them to the safe zone. I'll hold them off." "That's crazy, sir," Kyle argued. "You can't stay alone." "I'm not asking, Sergeant. That's an order." Kyle knew that look. He had seen it before in soldiers who had lost everything. "At least take the radio. When you're ready to be picked up, call in." Alan took the radio, but they both knew he would never use it. He watched the vehicles drive away, then turned back toward the building. He had enough ammunition to make a difference. Maybe even enough to take down the alien commander. It didn't really matter if he survived. There was nothing left for him anyway. He set up in a defensible position across from the building, hidden among the ruins of what had been a small coffee shop. Lisa had loved places like this. The thought came suddenly, bringing with it a wave of pain so sharp it almost made him drop his rifle. When the Krazak emerged from the building, Alan was ready. He took out 3 of the regular soldiers before they spotted him. Then it was a game of hide and seek through the ruined streets. He would fire, move, fire again. The aliens were smart, adjusting to his tactics, but Alan didn't care about surviving. He only cared about hurting them. The alien commander, Vexthor, watched the humans' tactics with growing interest. This one fought differently than the others. There was something in his movements that spoke of a warrior with nothing to lose. Such fighters were rare and dangerous. By nightfall, Alan had killed 12 more Krazak soldiers. His ammunition was running low. He had been grazed by their energy weapons twice, and his left arm was becoming harder to use. But he kept moving, kept fighting. He found himself near the river, cornered in the remains of a collapsed bridge. The big alien commander had separated from his troops and was hunting Alan personally now. There was nowhere left to run. As the massive shape of Vexthor appeared against the night sky, Alan checked his rifle. 1 shot left. He aimed carefully, waiting for the perfect moment. The alien stopped, studying him with eyes that glowed yellow in the darkness. Then in perfect English it spoke. "You fight well, human. Why do you not retreat with the others?" Alan steadied his aim, finger on the trigger. "Because I'm already dead," he answered. "My family was killed when you attacked. All I have left is making sure you pay for it." The alien tilted its head, seeming genuinely curious. "You seek death?" "I seek justice," Alan said, "but I'm not afraid of death." For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Alan fired his last shot. It hit exactly where he aimed, at a small gap in the armor near the alien's neck. But Vexthor moved with impossible speed, deflecting just enough that the shot didn't kill. The last thing Alan saw was the alien commander moving toward him, faster than any human could react. And the last thing he felt was surprise when, instead of killing him, Vexthor knocked him unconscious. The scariest warrior in the galaxy had found something new, a human who wasn't afraid to die. And that, to a Krazak, was worth studying. Alan woke up to pain. His body felt heavy and his head throbbed. He kept his eyes closed, trying to figure out where he was by sound and smell. The air was different, cleaner, but with a strange metallic scent. The sounds were unfamiliar too, a low hum that seemed to come from everywhere and occasional clicks and whistles that didn't sound human. He was alive. That wasn't part of his plan. Slowly, he opened his eyes. He was in a small room with gray metal walls, no windows, a single door that didn't look like any door he had seen before. He was lying on something like a bed, but it conformed to his body in a way that seemed to ease his pain. Alan checked himself for injuries. His left arm had been bandaged with a strange, slightly glowing material. The cuts and burns from the battle were covered with the same stuff. Someone had treated his wounds. The aliens had kept him alive. Why? The door slid open with a soft hiss. A Krazak entered, smaller than the commander he had faced but still towering over him. This one wore what looked like a white covering over parts of its armor, something like a medical uniform. "You are awake," it said in English that sounded strangely flat, like it was coming from a machine. "Good. Commander Vexthor wishes to speak with you when you are able." Alan sat up, ignoring the pain that shot through his body. "Where am I?" "You are aboard the command ship," the alien replied. "I am Dr. Krila. I have been assigned to ensure your recovery." Alan looked around for something he could use as a weapon. There was nothing. He was trapped in an alien ship with no way out and no way to fight, but that didn't mean he would cooperate. "Why am I here?" he asked. "Why not just kill me?" The alien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Commander Vexthor has questions. He has never encountered a human like you before." Before Alan could ask more, The alien doctor left, the door sealing behind it. Alan was alone again. He tested his strength by standing up. His legs were weak, but they held him. He walked around the small room, looking for any weakness, any way out. There was none. Hours passed. Alan was brought food and water by another alien, not the doctor. The food was strange but edible. The water tasted clean. They were keeping him healthy. That worried him more than if they had hurt him. On the third day of his captivity, the door opened and Commander Vexthor himself entered. Up close, the alien leader was even more impressive and terrifying. Nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales that seemed to absorb light. His forearms ended in clawed hands, and the armor he wore looked like it was part of his body. "Lieutenant Alan Mitchell," Vexthor said, his voice deeper and clearer than the doctor's. "You have recovered well." Alan stood straight, refusing to show fear. "How do you know my name?" "We have been studying your species since we arrived," Vexthor replied. "Your military records were easy to access. 12 years of service. Multiple commendations for bravery, a wife and child, both now deceased." The casual mention of his family sent a wave of anger through Alan. "Why am I here?" he demanded again. Vexthor moved closer, studying him with yellow eyes that seemed to see too much. "You are here because you intrigue me. In 17 planetary conquests, I have never met a warrior who truly did not fear death, who sought it out." "I don't fear death," Alan agreed. "Not anymore. And that is why you are valuable," Vexthor said. "The Krazak Empire does not just conquer worlds, Lieutenant Mitchell. We study them, we learn from them, and occasionally we find something worth preserving." Alan laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You killed millions of us, destroyed our cities, and now you want to preserve something? Your species fights well," Vexthor said, ignoring Alan's anger. "But they fight from fear. Fear of losing their lives, their loved ones, their world. You fight differently. Without fear, it makes you unpredictable." The commander turned and walked to the door. "Rest. In 2 days you will be moved to a more comfortable facility where we can continue our conversations." After Vexthor left, Alan sat on the edge of his bed thinking. The aliens weren't just killing machines, they were studying humanity. Looking for weaknesses, maybe, or for strengths they could use. Either way, he wasn't going to help them. The next morning, Alan was ready. When the doctor came to check his wounds, he pretended to be weaker than he was. When the alien leaned close to examine the wound on his arm, Alan struck. A quick move he had learned in combat training, using the alien's own weight against it. The doctor went down hard, making a high-pitched sound that might have been a cry for help. Alan didn't wait to find out. He grabbed what looked like a weapon from the doctor's belt and ran into the corridor outside his room. The ship was huge and confusing, corridors that all looked the same. Signs in an alien language he couldn't read, but Alan had a soldier's training. He moved carefully, hiding when he heard sounds, always trying to head downward. Ships had escape pods. If he could find one, alarms started to sound. A voice spoke in the Krazak language, then in English. "Human prisoner escaped. Security teams to level 4. Alan smiled grimly. At least now he knew what level he was on. He found a maintenance shaft and climbed down, moving from level to level. The weapon he had stolen was some kind of stun gun. He used it twice on Krazak crew members who spotted him. It wouldn't be long before they figured out where he was. On what he thought was level 2, Alan found something unexpected. A communication center. Screens showing Earth from orbit. Maps and charts of military movements. And there, on one screen, coordinates for what looked like the next Krazak attack. Alan had no way to contact Earth's forces, but he memorized what he could, hoping he would live long enough to use the information. He was studying the screen when he felt something behind him. He turned, raising his stolen weapon, but he was too slow. Vexthor stood in the doorway, watching, him with those yellow eyes. "Impressive," the commander said. "No human has ever escaped containment before." "I'm not like other humans," Alan said, knowing he was trapped but refusing to give up. No, Vexthor agreed. You are not. Which is why I ordered my troops not to harm you when they found you. Alan stared at him, confused. You let me escape? I let you try, Vexthor corrected. I wanted to see what you would do, where you would go. He gestured to the screens. And now I know. Even with no hope of escape, you seek information to help your people. Alan raised the weapon, pointing it at Vexthor's head. Maybe I'll just kill you instead. You can try, Vexthor said calmly. That weapon will not penetrate my armor, but the attempt would be interesting. For a moment, Alan considered it. A futile gesture, but at least it would be on his terms. Then he lowered the weapon. What do you want from me? He asked. Understanding, Vexthor replied. And perhaps in time, you will want something from us as well. The next week passed in a strange pattern. Alan was moved to larger quarters with actual furniture and a viewport that showed the stars. Each day, Vexthor would come to speak with him, sometimes for an hour, sometimes longer. The alien commander asked questions about Earth, about human history, about warfare, but mostly he wanted to know about Alan. Your military records say you were a skilled soldier before the invasion, Vexthor said during one of these talks, but they do not explain why you fight as you do now. Alan stood by the viewport, looking at the distant blue shape of Earth. I told you. You killed my family. Many humans have lost loved ones, Vexthor replied. They feel grief, anger, fear. But you are different. Alan turned to face the alien. What do you want me to say? That losing them broke something in me? That I don't care if I live or die? Anymore? Fine, it's true. Vexthor made a sound that might have been satisfaction. That is what interests me. In Krazak culture, all we do is to ensure our survival, our glory, our place in history. The thought of not caring about survival is alien to us. Is that why you conquer other worlds? For glory? We conquer because it is what we are. Vexthor said simply. Just as humans explore or build or create art, it is the nature of our species. Alan laughed bitterly. So we should just accept being conquered, being killed? No, Vexthor said. You should fight, and in fighting show us who you truly are. The conversations continued day after day. Alan learned about the Krazak, how they had evolved on a harsh world with many predators, how conquest had become their way of testing themselves against the universe. Vexthor learned about humans, their history of both war and peace, their art and science, their ability to find meaning even in suffering. But Alan never forgot that he was a prisoner, and he never stopped looking for a way to escape. His chance came during the third week. A smaller Krazak ship docked with the command vessel. There was activity in the corridors, guards being reassigned. The doctor, Krila, came to check on Alan's healing wounds. What's happening? Alan asked. We have captured more humans, Krila answered. Soldiers like you. Alan felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. Other humans on the ship meant potential allies, maybe even a chance to get back to Earth. Will I be allowed to see them? He asked, trying to sound merely curious. Krila made the clicking, sound that Alan had learned was a negative. They are not special cases like you. They will be processed and studied like other captured specimens. The word specimens sent a chill through Alan. He had been treated well, even with respect. But that wasn't the case for most humans taken by the Krazak. When Krila left, Alan began planning. The new prisoners would be a distraction. Security might be lighter. And he had spent weeks memorizing the ship's layout from what he could see during his limited movements outside his quarters. He waited until the ship's lighting dimmed for the night cycle. Then he used a piece of metal he had worked loose from his bed to short-circuit the door controls. The skills he'd learned in the military came back easily. The corridor was empty. Alan moved quickly, heading toward where he thought the docking bay would be. Twice he had to hide from Krazak patrols. Once he had to backtrack when he found a sealed door. But he kept moving, determined to find the other humans and escape. He found them in a large holding cell near the medical bay. 20 humans, men and women in torn military uniforms. Some were injured, all looked defeated. Alan used his makeshift tool to open the cell door. The prisoners looked up in shock at seeing another human. "Who are you?" asked a woman with captain's insignia on her uniform. "Lieutenant Alan Mitchell, United Earth Defense Force," he answered. "I'm getting you out of here." "How?" the captain asked. "We're on an alien ship in orbit. There's nowhere to go." "There are escape pods," Alan said, "and shuttles in the docking bay. I've been watching their movements for weeks. I know this ship, the Yai." Captain stood up. "I'm Captain Samantha Powell. If you really know a way off this ship, we'll follow you." Alan led them through the corridors, moving as quietly as 20 people could. They encountered 2 Krazak guards. Alan and 2 of the stronger prisoners took them down before they could sound an alarm. They were close to the docking bay when the alarms finally went off. Red lights flashed in the corridors. A voice spoke in Krazak, then in English. "Human, escape in progress. All security teams report to level 3. Run!" Alan shouted. They abandoned stealth and sprinted for the docking bay doors. Inside the massive bay, there were several Krazak shuttles and a row of what looked like escape pods. But there were also guards, already moving to block their escape. "Get to the Yai." "Shuttles," Alan ordered. "I'll hold them off." "Not alone, you won't," Captain Powell said. She and several others took positions beside Alan as the rest of the group ran for the nearest shuttle. The fight was brief but intense. The humans were unarmed except for the weapons they had taken from the guards. The Krazak had superior strength and armor, but desperation made the humans dangerous. Alan saw 3 of his fellow humans fall. He kept firing, kept moving, drawing the Krazak fire away from the shuttle where the others were trying to figure out the alien controls. Then a familiar figure entered the bay. Vexthor, without armor but still imposing, walked calmly through the firefight as if bullets couldn't touch him. "Enough," the commander said, his voice cutting through the noise. To Alan's surprise, the Krazak guards lowered their weapons. Vexthor walked toward Alan, stopping just a few feet away. "You could have left at any time," Vexthor said quietly. "I would have given you a shuttle if you had asked." Alan kept his stolen weapon pointed at the commander. "And the other prisoners?" "They are not like you," Vexthor said, "but they are under your command now. If you wish to take them, you may." Alan couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Why? Why let us go?" Vexthor's yellow eyes seemed to look through him. "Because I wish to see what you will do next, Alan Mitchell. Because you have shown me something I have not seen before. And because a warrior should be tested in battle, not kept in a cage." He gestured to the shuttle. "Go. Return to your people. Tell them what you have learned about us. And then perhaps we will meet again, as equals." Alan backed toward the shuttle, not taking his eyes or his weapon off Vexthor. The other humans were already inside, the engines starting to hum. "This doesn't change anything," Alan said. "You're still invading my world. I'm still going to fight you." "I would expect nothing less," Vexthor replied. "But now you will fight with knowledge, not just anger. And that makes you even more dangerous." Alan stepped into the shuttle. Captain Powell was at the controls looking at him with confusion. "They're just letting us go?" "Not us," Alan said. "Me. And you're with me, so you get to go too." He looked back at Vexthor, standing alone as his troops kept their distance. "He wants to see what I'll do next." "And what will you do?" Powell asked as she guided the shuttle out of the bay. Alan watched as the massive Krazak ship grew smaller behind them. "I'm going to show him exactly what humans can do when we have nothing left to lose." The shuttle landed at what remained of a United Earth Defense Force base outside of Seattle. It was one of the few military installations still operating after a month of alien invasion. As the shuttle's doors opened, armed soldiers surrounded it, weapons raised. "Hold your fire," Captain Powell shouted as she stepped out with her hands up. "We're human. We escaped from a Krazak ship." General Frank Miller, the base commander, was called. He looked at the ragged group of escaped prisoners with suspicion, especially Alan. "How do we know you weren't sent here as spies?" he demanded. "No one escapes from the Krazak." "We did," Alan said simply. and I brought information that might help us fight back. After hours of questioning and medical checks to make sure they weren't carrying alien tracking devices, Alan and Captain Powell were finally allowed to speak with the command staff. In a room deep inside the base, Alan shared everything he had learned about the Krozak, their ship layouts, their weapons, and most importantly, their plans for the next attack. "They're targeting our remaining military bases," he explained, pointing to a map. "Starting with this one, they'll be here in less than 2 days." General Miller frowned. "How do you know this, and why would they let you escape with this information?" Alan thought about Vexthor and their strange conversations. "Their commander is different. He thinks this is all some kind of test. He wants to see how we fight when we know what's coming." "That's insane," one of the officers said. "Maybe," Alan agreed. "But it's also our only chance. We know when and where they're coming. We can be ready." The next day was a blur of activity. The base prepared for attack. Civilians were evacuated. Weapons were distributed. Traps were set. Alan worked with Captain Powell to train soldiers in fighting the Krozak, based on what he had learned during his time on their ship. "Aim for the joints in their armor," he told a group of young soldiers. "And don't stand still. They track movement patterns. If you move randomly, it confuses their targeting systems." The night before the expected attack, Captain Powell found Alan alone, staring at the stars. "You should get some sleep," she said. "I'll sleep when this is over," he replied. Powell studied his face in the moonlight. "You're different from when we found you on that ship. Less lost." Alan touched the wedding ring he still wore on a chain around his neck. "I'm still lost. But now I have a purpose." "Revenge?" "No," Alan said after a moment. "Understanding. Vexthor thinks he's learning about humans by studying us, but I'm learning about them too, and knowledge is the only weapon that might actually work." The Krozak attack began at dawn, just as Alan had predicted. Their ships darkened the sky, over the base. But this time, Earth's forces were ready. Hidden artillery fired at the ships from carefully concealed positions. Soldiers with special ammunition targeted the weak points in Krozak armor. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens were facing an enemy that knew how to fight them. Alan was in the command center with General Miller directing the defense. The radio crackled with reports from the front lines. The humans were still taking losses, but they were also inflicting damage. "They're retreating from the south gate," a voice reported. "We hit their lead troops hard." Alan shook his head. "It's a trap. They're drawing our forces out. Keep everyone in their positions." General Miller looked at him sharply. "How can you be sure?" "Because it's what I would do," Alan said, "and Vexthor thinks like I do." Sure enough, a second wave of Krozak troops appeared, trying to flank the defenders. But because Alan had anticipated this move, Earth forces were waiting for them. The battle raged for hours. The humans fought with new determination, knowing that this might be their last stand. Alan moved from position to position, offering advice, encouraging the troops, even picking up a weapon when necessary. Then, in the middle of the fighting, a message came through on a channel that only Alan's communicator could receive. "Lieutenant Mitchell," Vexthor's voice said clearly, "you have learned well. Your forces fight with new skill today." "We're just getting started," Alan replied, ducking as an explosion shook the building he was in. "Indeed," Vexthor said, and Alan could hear what sounded like satisfaction in the alien's voice. "This is becoming interesting." The communication ended. Alan rejoined Captain Powell at a defensive position near the base's main entrance. "Was that him?" she asked. "The alien commander?" Alan nodded. "He's watching, evaluating. Like this is some kind of game?" "No," Alan said. "Like this is a test. For both of us." As the day wore on, something unexpected happened. The Krozak began to pull back. Not in defeat. Their forces were still strong, but in what seemed like a deliberate withdrawal. "They're retreating," General Miller said in disbelief as the reports came in. "We're actually winning." Alan knew better. We're not winning. Vexthor is changing the game. That night, as the human forces regrouped and tended to their wounded, a single Krazak shuttle landed outside the base. No weapons fired from it. Instead, a message was broadcast on all frequencies. To the human forces, Vexthor's voice said, "You have fought well today, better than any species we have encountered in 17 conquests. In recognition of this, I offer a challenge." The humans listened in silence as the alien continued. 1. Warrior against 1 warrior. Lieutenant Alan Mitchell against myself. If he wins, the Krazak fleet will leave Earth space. If I win, your resistance ends. In the command center, all eyes turned to Alan. "It's a trick," General Miller said immediately. "We can't trust them." "It's not a trick," Alan said quietly. "It's their way. Combat is everything to them. Victory in personal combat is the highest honor." "You can't seriously be considering this," Captain Powell protested. "He's their best warrior. He's killed champions from 17 different worlds." Alan looked at the map showing the remaining human strongholds. There weren't many. Earth was losing the war despite today's small victory. "What choice do we have?" he asked. "We can keep fighting and eventually lose, or I can take this chance." "It's suicide," Powell said. Alan smiled slightly, the first smile she had seen from him. That used to be the plan anyway. He picked up a communicator and spoke clearly, knowing Vexthor would hear. "I accept your challenge. Name the time and place." The response came immediately. 3 days from now, the ruins of your Washington monument come alone." As the communication ended, the command room erupted in arguments. Some thought it was their only hope. Others thought it was a trap. But Alan was no longer listening. He was thinking about Vexthor, about what he had learned about the Krazak during his time as a prisoner, and about what the alien commander might have learned about him. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that understanding could save Earth. "I need to prepare," he said, cutting through the arguments. "And I need everything we know about Krazak combat techniques." Captain Powell looked at him with concern. "You really think you can win?" Alan touched his wife's ring again. "I think I can surprise him. And sometimes surprise is enough." Dawn broke over the ruins of Washington, D.C. on the day of the challenge. The once proud monuments were now broken shadows of themselves, the streets empty except for debris and the occasional military patrol. At the remains of the Washington monument, a large circle had been cleared. Around it, Krazak troops stood at attention, their weapons holstered but ready. Alan arrived alone, as promised. He wore standard military armor, reinforced where possible but still much lighter than Krazak battle gear. He carried a combat knife and a modified energy weapon he had taken from the alien ship during his escape. Nothing more. Captain Powell had driven him to the edge of the meeting place against her better judgment. "You don't have to do this," she said one last time as he prepared to leave the vehicle. "We can still fight them the normal way." "And lose," Alan said quietly. "This way there's a chance." Powell looked at him with concern. "When I first met you on that ship, you were ready to die. Are you still?" Alan thought about it. In the weeks since his capture and return, something had changed. The empty feeling inside him was still there, the grief for his family still raw. But there was something else now too. A purpose. A connection to the other survivors fighting for Earth. "I'm ready to die if I have to," he said finally, "but I'd rather live to see them leave." He walked alone across the broken ground toward the monument. Hundreds of pairs of alien eyes watched him. He kept his steps steady, his back straight. No fear. Not anymore. Vexthor waited in the center of the circle. Today he wore full ceremonial battle armor, more ornate than the combat suit Alan had seen before. Its dark green plates were decorated with symbols and markings Alan didn't understand. The alien commander carried no visible weapons. "Lieutenant Alan Mitchell," Vexthor said as Alan approached. His voice carried easily in the morning quiet. "You honor me by accepting this challenge." "I'm not here for your honor," Alan replied. I'm here to end this war. Vexthor made a sound that might have been a laugh. As am I. Though perhaps we seek different endings. A smaller Krazak stepped forward, carrying what looked like a metal box. He opened it, revealing two identical energy daggers, their edges glowing with a faint blue light. The traditional weapons of combat, Vexthor explained. Equal for both participants. Alan looked at the weapons, then at Vexthor's forearms. Equal? I will use only 2 arms, Vexthor said, binding his lower set with a ceremonial cord, as is traditional when facing a 2-armed species. Alan wasn't sure if this was meant as a courtesy or an insult. He said nothing, just took one of the daggers and tested its weight. It was perfectly balanced, deadly sharp. The smaller Krazak stepped back and spoke in their language. Vexthor translated. He has announced the terms. Combat continues until one yields or can no longer fight. If you are victorious, the Krazak fleet will leave Earth space and not return for 100 years. If I am victorious, humanity accepts. Krazak rule. Alan nodded. He had known the stakes from the beginning. One question, he said. Why this? Why offer a way out? Vexthor tilted his head, studying Alan with those yellow eyes. Because in 17 conquests, no species has shown what yours has. No individual has shown what you have. And that is worth acknowledging. Before Alan could ask what he meant, the smaller Krazak struck a metal object, creating a ringing sound. The combat had begun. Vexthor moved first, faster than something his size should be able to move. Alan barely got his dagger up in time to block the first strike. The energy blades sparked when they met, sending a shock through Alan's arm. The alien commander was strong, incredibly strong. Each blow felt like it might break Alan's bones even when he blocked it. But Alan was faster, more agile. He ducked and rolled, landing strikes that glanced off Vexthor's armor but occasionally finding gaps. They fought for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Sweat poured down Alan's face. His arms ached. He had cuts on his arms and legs where Vexthor's blade had slipped past his defenses. But he was still standing, still fighting, and something was changing in the way Vexthor fought. The alien commander was becoming frustrated. His attacks were harder but less precise. He was used to overwhelming opponents quickly, not to drawn-out combat. You should have yielded by now, Vexthor said during a brief pause when they circled each other. No other opponent has lasted this long. Humans don't give up easily, Alan replied, trying to hide how exhausted he was. Especially humans with nothing to lose. But that is no longer true for you, Vexthor said. You have found a reason to live. I can see it in the way you fight. The words struck Alan harder than any physical blow. Vexthor was right. Somewhere, in the past weeks, his death wish had faded. He still missed his family with an ache that would never fully heal, but he wanted to live, to see Earth free, to help rebuild, and that made him even more dangerous. The next time Vexthor attacked, Alan was ready. He ducked under the alien's guard and drove his energy dagger into a gap in the armor near the shoulder. Vexthor roared in pain, green blood flowing from the wound. The alien commander stepped back, looking at Alan with what might have been respect. First blood is yours. Few have ever managed that. Alan didn't respond. He pressed his advantage, moving in close where Vexthor's longer reach was less effective. He landed another strike, this one to the alien's leg. Vexthor stumbled. For a moment it seemed like Alan might actually win. Then the alien did something unexpected. He unbound his lower arms. Is that allowed? Alan asked, stepping back. No, Vexthor admitted. But I find I do not wish to lose today. With 4 arms now, Vexthor became even more dangerous. Alan fought desperately, using every trick and skill he had learned, but he was tiring, slowing down. A powerful blow knocked him to the ground, his dagger spinning away. Vexthor stood over him, energy blade raised for a killing stroke. Alan looked up at him, still showing no fear. Do it, he said quietly. But Vexthor didn't strike. Instead, he lowered his weapon. No, you have earned more than death today, The alien commander turned to the watching Krazak troops and spoke in their language. A murmur ran through them, a sound of surprise and confusion. "What are you doing?" Alan asked, getting slowly to his feet. "Declaring the combat a draw," Vexthor said. "Which means neither of us won. Which means we must negotiate instead." "Your people will accept that?" "They will accept my word," Vexthor said. "I am still their commander." Later, as medical teams from both sides treated the wounded, Vexthor explained his decision to Alan and the human leaders who had arrived after. The combat ended. "Your species has shown qualities we have not seen before," the alien commander said. "Courage without conquest. Strength born from loss. The ability to face death without fear yet still choose life. These are things the Krazak can learn from." A treaty was signed that day. The Krazak would leave Earth but would return as allies, not conquerors. Knowledge and technology would be shared. Both species would grow stronger together. As the alien ships prepared to depart, Vexthor sought out Alan one last time. "You never asked what happens to the commander who fails to complete." "A conquest," he said. "What happens?" Alan asked. "Normally, disgrace, exile. But I think my people will make an exception in this case. Sometimes finding an equal is better than finding a victim." Alan looked up at the scariest warrior in the galaxy, the being who had caused so much death and destruction, and saw something he hadn't expected, a chance for change. For both their species. "Next time you visit," Alan said, "let's skip the invasion part." Vexthor made the sound that Alan now recognized as laughter. "Agreed, Alan Mitchell, until we meet again."